Duane Miller program. Glad you are with us. It's about 7 minutes after the hour as we start a brand new week. Hope you had a great day in church yesterday, and I hope you're driving carefully on those freeways out there. Don't cut that guy off. Just stay in your lane and mind your manners. On this Monday afternoon, we want everybody to get home safely. You're listening right here on KTEK. It's 11:10 a.m. Our number is 713-961-4191. We'll be taking your calls in just a few moments. We've got 2 or 3 subjects we want to talk with you about today. Hope you'll be encouraged. Probably it was in January of 1990 on a Sunday morning. When I got out of bed that particular morning, I just felt wretched. Everybody's had the feeling at one time or another when you know you're coming down with something. I was achy. My throat was scratchy. I just felt miserable. It was one of those Sundays I would love to have crawled back in bed and pulled the covers over my head, but I had to go preach. I didn't have anybody down at the church to fill in for me that day. So in the 8:30 service, I tried to do my message and my song the way I had planned, and I didn't like the way it sounded, and I certainly didn't like the way it felt in my throat. So at 11 o'clock, I just got through the outline as best I could. By Sunday night, when I returned to church, I was desperately ill. I had such a fever. I was dizzy. I could barely stand up. I really hurt. I was just physically, for that night, shot. But it turns out that flu virus got into the nerves of my vocal cords and destroyed the nerves. And for the next 3 years of my life, I was left with a pressure in my throat that was like a hand on my windpipe, gripping and testing me right here.
It's almost like this is all he could do.
It was just kind of like, this, and then it would just fade away.
He would just talk like this.
That's all he could do. You had to work. You had to work very hard to understand what he said.
Basically, carrying on a conversation with Duane over the telephone was almost impossible.
Tests, doctors, medical center, that became the routine of our life. And my voice didn't change. No matter what I did, it didn't change. They thought at one point I had multiple sclerosis. They thought at one point maybe a rare form of epilepsy. They thought perhaps myasthenia gravis. We went through a myriad of things. 18 minutes before the top of the hour on the Duane Miller program for this Monday afternoon. Glad you're with us. Let me take a call from Brian on line 5. Hi, Brian. How are you this afternoon? Glad you have called. Glad to have you as a part of the program today. Brian, I lost my voice to a virus in 1990, and I was told by the best doctors in the world that I would never be able to speak again. Somebody involved in ministry like I was, that's pretty tough medicine. My doctor came in and sat down with me one Friday, and he said, Duane, I want you to take a leave of absence. And I said to him, a couple of more weeks. I've been out of the pulpit for almost 5 months already. And I've said, couple weeks, no problem. My church will be thrilled to just hear the news, and sure, we can do that. And he said, no. I want you to take 6 months off from now. And he said, that 6 months, I want you to be totally silent. So on following Sunday morning, I went to the pulpit in Brenham, and as best I could croak it out, I told them what had happened to me, and that the doctors were saying now that they weren't sure I would ever get to preach. And I said, gang, you need a pastor. You've been more than fair, and I love you to death, but you need somebody that can be here and take care, and I can't. So I stepped down and resigned. So we came back to Houston at that point in time. Joylene, my wife, becomes the breadwinner in our family. So suddenly, I'm put in a position where I can't provide. That's tough. What's your day today?
I'm in Mammoth today.
That's exciting.
Really.
I didn't feel like God had let me down, but I said so many times, Lord, I know you're up to something I don't understand, because you've given Duane such a gift for teaching and for understanding the Scripture. And I know you're not done with Duane yet. I know you're not done with him.
We go through things, and he allows us to go through things for a purpose. Sometimes we'll know the purpose, and sometimes we won't. But I never felt like God let us down.
I'm a very practical person, so I just felt that if Dad was going to be mute, if that was what it was coming to, that we needed to figure out how we were going to communicate with him. And, so my way of dealing with it was to go take sign language and to figure out what it was I needed to do so that he would be able to communicate.
I remember the girls both at different times on the phone. They would make sure their dad wasn't on there, and then they'd say, Mom, is Dad going to die? Is he going to make it?
That was something that we definitely thought of constantly, while we were at school, was, is Dad going to make it? And when we were before I was born, my father had recorded an album.
How sweet to hold our newborn baby and feel the pride and the joy.
For 3 years, I played that album just so that I could hear my dad's voice.
Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Initially, you pray for the healing immediate, for the restoration to what you consider normalcy, and you pray immediately, God, I want out of the box, touch my voice. I want to speak clearly. I want my job back. I want my kids back. I want things to be the way they were. I'm disturbed. I'm uncomfortable. I don't like this. God, put me back put Humpty Dumpty back together. That's your first prayer. And anybody who would say to you that that's not their first prayer, I question their veracity.
Duane came over to the house. He was unannounced. He walked in, and we talked for a while. I could now see the gravity of the situation that he was in, what the doctors had said, and they had said at that point that he was not ever going to have his voice back again. And there was some tears. I guess it's hard to talk even now. But as he was getting ready to leave and my wife showed up, that's when we got together and I literally placed my hand on his neck, right here, and everybody else did, and we prayed that God would just lead us in the direction that He wanted us to go, whether it was not ever getting the voice back and coping with it, or certainly we prayed that He would give Duane his voice back, but to give us the strength and the guidance to deal with that situation right now. And that's what we prayed about.
But over time, you begin to pray, God, obviously you have another purpose in all of this. Let me just see it. Let me be aware of what you're doing here. I'm not asking you to restore my voice, but I am asking you to please let me see what you're doing. Please let me see how I can be used. God, if this is what it's to be for me, then show me how it fits. I need some peace in this matter. It's the touch of it. I want you to be encouraged today, Brian, because I'll tell you something. When I was going through this, it was the prayers of my family, the prayers of my friends, those that knew me and loved me and supported me that kept me going. There were an awful lot of folks that literally called my name to God on a daily basis. The one good thing that happened for me is a Sunday school class that I had taught years before at First Baptist Church invited me back to speak and to teach a class. As I was teaching the class on a Sunday morning in January of 1993, God gave me back the voice that had been damaged in 1990. I was teaching a lesson that came from Psalm 103. David says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. He forgives all my sin, He heals all of my disease, and He redeems my life from the pit." And that's exactly what He did. When I showed up that Sunday morning to teach, my voice was not in good shape. Doctors had told me within another year I would lose it altogether, and it was beginning to get very painful for me to do what I did. We experimented with some microphones. I found a headset that I could wear. And when I would put that headset on and I would put the windscreen right on my lips and I would scream at it, top of my lungs, I could be heard most of the time. That's how I taught Sunday school.
Isn't the Lord good? It's a gorgeous day. I think everybody feels good just because the sun's out.
That Sunday school class had been taping lessons for over 25 years, so the fact that it happened to get caught on tape was no big deal.
So when the psalmist writes, and He heals all of my diseases, let me say to you that I believe God still heals. That hasn't ended.
I stood and told the class that morning, I still believe God heals. But the thought that kept going through my mind was, but why not me?
The psalmist says, I'm excited. Bless the Lord, O my soul. One of His benefits is He heals all of my diseases. And then in verse 4 he says, and He redeems my life from the pit.
It was on that word, pit, as I began to elaborate, that God intervened in that room, and my whole life changed. When He touched me, it was as if someone had simply removed the hand from my throat.
and he redeems my life from the pit. Now, I like that verse just a whole lot. I have had, and you have had in times past, pit experiences. We've all had times when our life seemed to be in a pit, in a grave. And we didn't have an answer.
That's what I'm thinking. Is that what I think it is?
When you looked at me, just prior to that, just instant before that, I heard your voice, and I punched Cindy in the ribs, and I said, "Listen to his voice." Just whispered it to her. And we just sat, just stunned. And then you looked at me. I knew.
And I don't understand this right now. I'm but overwhelmed at the moment.
Here's what my lead physician told me, and here's what I think is most important. He said, "Duane, I could probably explain away your ability to speak. Sometimes nerve tissue simply regenerates spontaneously." And he said, while it's not likely that yours did, he said, I could probably explain that away. But he said, the scar tissue that I observed in your throat is not there. And he said, I can't explain what happened to the scar tissue.
I still can't believe what God has done. I just, and how it touched all of our lives, not just us, but how it's touching lives even now. And it's all because of God and His grace.
God changed our life. Does prayer matter? Oh, yeah. Does God change things? Oh, yeah. But He changes people. Not just physically. He changed us emotionally and spiritually. I don't think there was anybody in this room, not just me, I don't think there was anybody in this room that will ever be the same again because of what God did that morning. I suppose that I believe God gave me back my voice simply because He wanted to point out that somebody that is as average as I am, God can work in their life. And you know what? That means, Brian, there's hope for you. It means that everyone that cares enough to ask God, to seek God's face, has the hope of a miracle in your own life. That's what I'm all about.
Because He lives, I can face tomorrow.
Hey gang, thanks for joining us on the drive home today. Thanks for driving safely. Don't forget to keep praying, keep looking up, keep believing God. He answers prayer. We'll see you same time tomorrow on the Duane Miller Show. Till then, I love you, Mom. Good night, Houston.